151.
Okay.
So
Yeah.
like a B flat.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
My name is Maddie Ulrich, and I'm the costume designer for.
Hi, my name's Annie Saunders, and I
Christopher
am
Roundtree. I'm
creating
the
the
conductor
rec
for
with
And
the
I'm
team.
Julian Lemira, and I am the set designer and costume designer.
I'm actually a visual artist in a performing arts.
I'm Kate Fry, and I'm the sonographer.
My name is
for
Missy
the rec.
Mazzoli, and I'm the composer.
I'm
for
Royce
the-
Fabric, and I am the
And I
librettist
really
for the
just
opera
love the
Proving Up.
heightened high art quality of it. It's really
The
great.
capacity for invention.
I'll be designing the costumes and the space, the environment.
When you're dealing with a living
in
composer and all
collaboration
these
with the
living
team.
collaborators, no wonder opera is viewed as this art form where everything meets.
I'm here today with Kate and Ben. So would you guys sort of tell me what you do and why you do what you do?
Sure, I'll start. So I am a Holland Community Opera Fellow at Opera Omaha currently, and we do a variety of work in the community. We serve as teaching artists, and we also perform in the community. We work with a variety of populations, specifically who may not have access to arts programming, and yeah, stuff like that.
I am my day job is I'm a financial planner. I work with, I own a business working with freelancers and other self-employed people, often creative types, working to help them reach their financial goals. And I also moonlight as the Supertitles operator for Opera Omaha.
Yeah, so I usually ask this question last, but it's one that I definitely want to make sure that I ask. What is a project that you've been most proud or has been the most fulfilling that you've done in your time sort of in the arts field or tangentially with the arts field?
Okay, well, that's hard because there's a few. One, for example, that we had last semester, it wasn't really a project per se, but we had a monthly master class with a music class from Ollie Webb, which is a program in the city for adults with developmental disabilities specifically. And we did a master class with them once a month, and we helped them work on pieces that they were working on, specifically musical theater pieces. And then we had kind of an end of the year celebration and performance in December, which was really, really great. And I found myself learning something new every single time we worked with them, and that was extremely fun and rewarding. And this semester, I actually just started a new project / class last night that I'm really excited about. Jessica and I are working at the Micah House, which is in Council Bluffs, and it's a facility for women specifically, and we're doing a class there twice a week, Tuesdays and Thursday nights, and it's just a music and songwriting creativity class, so I'm really excited about that as well.
That sounds like fun.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So for me, I guess I can split into my time in the arts versus with the arts. In the arts, so I was a vocal performance major in college and performed professionally for a few years after college. Probably my best memory of that time of working in the arts was the time that I got to travel in Germany with an ensemble with Helmut Rilling, doing some there's a few different summer programs that we did, but there was one doing Bach's St. Matthew Passion, there was one doing Handel's Messiah, so being able to go abroad and experience really great music in that setting was my kind of best time in the arts, I think. Working with the arts community, I think what I've been able to do in creating a business that can actually serve people who are working in the arts and working to kind of pursue their own the jobs that they love to do. There's not really someone doing what I do, working specifically with self-employed people. So that's part of it. And also I'm trying to help people before they get out of school to learn a little bit about the reality of making a career in the arts specifically. I'm actually doing a talk up at my alma mater, St. Olaf College, in a little over a month for some of the art students there, to talk a little bit about what they can expect when they go out in the world and start making having to make financial decisions on their own. So really just being able to make make these careers possible for people and kind of demystify some of that whole process of making a living doing what you love.
Yeah, if it wasn't for St. Olaf, I never would have known that arts administration was a thing because I'm at Carleton College across the river, and we don't have quite that same type of programming. We have studio arts, and that's studio arts music, but we're not growing artists. That's not, if you want that, you go to the other school.
Right.
And so I went to a talk with, I forget her name, but she works at the Walker Art Center, and she came down and was talking about art administration. I'd literally never heard of it before. But that completely changed my life path. So thanks, St. Olaf.
Wow.
But also
There you
it's
go.
thanks to you and people like you going and talking to us, people who don't know what they're doing.
I mean, when I was in school, there was really nothing to say, here is how you file a tax return. Here's what you need to know when you buy insurance. Like these kind of things to help people with these realities that they're going to experience in the real world. So that's just kind of what I'm trying to bring.
I still feel like I need that, honestly.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, so I think... I didn't really get your educational background, Kate.
Yeah. So I got my undergraduate degree. It was a liberal arts, just a bachelor of arts in music, with a vocal performance emphasis at Aurora University. It's in the suburbs of Chicago. And then I got my master's degree in vocal performance at Bowling Green State University in Ohio. And then I kind of had a buffer year before I got this position. So.
Yeah. And is this sort of the type of position that you want to continue with?
Yeah, during that buffer year, I worked for a charities organization, and I kind of fell into the job. I didn't really mean to. It just kind of happened because of a connection that I had from school. So that really sparked my interest in community engagement and working with a variety of populations. So when I saw this job description, I knew that it kind of intertwined the two things that I had experience in. So I immediately applied, and I think that definitely I would like to continue this work. I think that it's really important, and it needs to be brought out into other communities and to other operatic companies. So
yeah, definitely. Yeah, and let's see. Do you want to talk to us, mostly me, because I know nothing about it, about Supertitles in general?
Sure.
It took me a long time to realize. I was like, why are they not calling them subtitles? And then my brain eventually caught it, because it didn't occur to me that because it is just the difference of being on top versus on
that's
bottom of the screen,
literally
right?
it. That's the reason they're Supertitles.
I just assumed that because I went to one opera and I was like, they just did that for that one opera. I didn't realize that was just the trend. But
and some people actually call them surtitles too, which is
that French,
just French versus Latin. To the opera, just sitting in the audience, it's kind of the perfect job because you sit backstage with a score, watching the conductor on video, and following the music, following the score, and really just hitting the button on the computer that says go to the next slide. And I really enjoy it from the aspect of just really I sit there in 4 rehearsals and 2 performances, and you really get to know an opera just sitting there and following the score the entire time. That part of it I really enjoy. It's also, for a lot of people, it's kind of their connection to the story of an opera. If you don't speak Italian or French or Russian or any of these languages that operas are in, and sometimes even they'll do English operas with surtitles just to make it easier to follow along the text. But if you don't speak these languages, you can hear the beautiful music and the great performers, and see everything that's going on stage, but having that extra those words there to kind of support the story, support everything that's going on. That's how I think of it, is that it's really supporting the story, because you don't want people just staring up at the title screen the entire time.
That's sort of how I feel. I sometimes get trapped into that, and I managed to get away with it when I was watching Pagliacci, only because I watched it enough times that eventually I had gotten to do both. But I feel like if you've never seen the opera and you don't know the story, it's hard to not want to read.
It's tricky, yeah, and it's so what I do for some shows, I guess for last year's for the Opera Outdoors concert, I actually wrote the titles and did the translation For the other shows, I've just sort of edited a title deck that's already been created. Make sure everything's in order. There are no typos. It matches the score and everything like that. And I realized when I was actually doing the translation, it's tough because for me, I'm tempted to make it a real exact translation and have every little bit of linguistic nuance that I can wring out of it that comes from the score, and you really can't have that because then everyone's you don't want everyone's attention just to be on the title screen the whole time. You want that to come out in the performance, and have the titles just there for you're able to just glance up at it and then stay back and involved in the story on stage.
Yeah, so there's definitely some creativity behind the translation, because I wasn't sure whether Supertitle operators were the ones who were doing the linguistic translation, but
it depends.
Yeah.
I'm sure every different opera company does it a little bit different way. Oftentimes, for the last show, for Pagliacci, they actually rented the titles from another company, from I think it was Chicago Lyric Opera. It was in Chicago. But they, because companies do translations, and it makes sense rather than have to hire another translator to kind of do the same thing again for commonly done operas for things like Pagliacci. There's usually some other company that's done it before. I know for the upcoming Faust opera in the One Festival this year, since it's kind of a new production, there's a new version of the score that's being produced, and or a new old version, I guess, but something that hasn't really been produced before. They are hiring someone to write the titles, and they're actually coming in to do to operate the titles as well, to be there during the production. So sometimes it is all the same person, but in some cases you can use someone else's work to be able to produce that.
Yeah. And I'll come back to more Supertitle things, because I have some technical questions. Sure. But I figured we'd switch over to Kate. Unfortunately, you guys have very different sets of questions, just because one's behind the scenes, one's performing, so it's a little different. But for you, I had sort of some questions about where your creativity stems from, because that's sort of the basis of this podcast, is trying to figure out where creativity meets for different people in the arts. So for you, I guess I'd sort of ask, what do you pull into your performances? So if you get a role, what is sort of the first step that you take into trying to embody the character? Do you pull from things from your past? Do you go to literature or music? Or what's your go-to?
So when I study a role, the first thing I do is I read the text, because the text is the story, right? So that's the first thing I do, and then usually I look at a variety of synopsis examples, and I also do a lot of watching. I watch a lot of examples to see how other people have interpreted this character, how the character falls into the story, and all of these different examples, just to get some inspiration for myself. That's usually how I do it. And then when I practice, I obviously look at the music and the dynamics and, the notes, the range, what the music is doing and what parts with the text, and why it's doing that with that, like why is it getting loud with this text? Well, this is why. So I interpret that. I use that to interpret the characteristics of that person. And I really try to look at that very closely when I practice, because then it helps me to do that on stage. It's hard to just go on stage and be another person if you haven't really, really studied it when you're sitting in the practice room.
Yeah. And your score, do you mark it a bunch? Do you write all over it?
Yes.
What does that look like?
A scribbled mess.
Scribbles, yeah. Is it just like loud here, smile here? Like, what does it look like?
Usually a lot of circles, highlighting, a lot of like lines where to breathe and why I'm breathing there. And sometimes I even write the blocking in, exactly what I'm doing, when I'm doing it. So yeah, it's just a there's a ton of stuff all over it.
Yeah.
Yes.
I'm gonna have my first taste of score marking for Elixir.
Okay.
I'm pretty nervous.
Yeah.
So we'll see how that goes. Yeah. I've also never seen. I'm assuming is your score just your part most of the time, or does it have?
No,
how does
it usually has the orchestra part, or if it's just a vocal score, it has the piano part. I like looking at a full orchestra score, even though it's a little overwhelming, because I like knowing what instruments are doing what, when, and where. So I like that. But a lot of people just get a vocal score, and then it shows all the voice parts.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, when other characters come in and stuff like that.
Yeah. So if you get a character, are you usually just sort of looking at that character by itself, or are you relating it to other sort of other versions of that character that you've seen before?
Oh, that's hard. I usually try to decide what I think for myself first when I read through the text. And then I do look at other examples when I'm watching examples of other productions, but I try to get my own individual idea of that character. Does that answer the question?
Yeah, no, it does.
Yeah. Okay.
I was assuming it would be some sort of mix.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Okay. Well, I don't even know really what to ask about the technical side because I know nothing about it. But I was just sort of wondering how do Supertitles and stage design work together?
Sure. So for most productions, the Supertitles are really kind of a set thing. It depends on the space that you're working in, of course, but for a normal Opera Omaha show in the Orpheum Theater, there is a set of they're actually LED tiles. They used to project them on a screen using just a projector, but a few years ago they upgraded to LED tiles above the screen, above the stage. There's not a whole lot you can do stage design wise to really incorporate that in. Unfortunately, I think it would be cool to have a way to do a production where the titles were a little more, you'd have to make them a little more abstract and not so literal, literally what's happening in the words, but incorporate them somehow into projections on the stage design. I think that would be pretty cool. But right now they kind of are static with what they are. The setup that we have at the Orpheum can be moved. There are, I think, more of these tiles that we use that we can put up in Turner Park if we're doing opera outdoors, or we can put them up in the Connective if we're doing them there. From a technical standpoint, the only difficulty is just making sure that the words are large enough to be readable and also not kind of displaying wonky on the screen. And also funnily enough, brightness was kind of an issue, something we had to work around, just because you get a black. There was a show at Proving Up at Connective last year. There were some, it's a pretty small space. It's smaller than most opera spaces tend to be. And there were some blackout moments, really, really powerful moments in the show. And, if there are words on the screen and they're very bright, it really kind of can ruin the moment.
Yeah, it
so,
definitely detracts from the drama.
Yeah. So, I mean, what you're saying, it's they're part of the story, but they're not. They can't just be floating on top no matter what's going on. They really have to be. Oftentimes in the opera, there's jokes there's moments where timing is super important, so the audience gets the joke when the performers on stage are making it, and that can be something that you have to maybe change something that's in the score, or do something where the audience isn't laughing at the joke 5 seconds before when it actually happens in the music.
Right.
So that's where.
Is it always just plain white text, or do people sort of mess with the fonts and?
No, I haven't seen much changing things around in that way. I think that would be a little bit too much of a distraction, and that's more of an artistic decision that's above my head certainly. Yeah. But I could see, just because they have. I think there was a bit of a struggle against Supertitles when they first started to appear. People did think that they would be too distracting to have on stage. Now they're pretty mainstream. The Met Opera has them on the back of seats in front of them, so they are kind of subtitles, I guess, there. But they're pretty mainstream. Some companies like to make the language in the title text to be a little more what's the word? Just more contemporary. Put more slang in there. Make it. Try to make it connect. Some people would rather just have it be a straight up, translation of what they're saying and what the original libretto said. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. All right, we're gonna pivot again. Like I said, different questions. So it's like you. Yeah. So what inspired you to go towards opera? Is there something in particular about that type of singing or that kind of role that really? Or was there one moment in your childhood that you were like, oh, this is it. This is what I want to do?
Yeah, sort of. So when I was in high school, I was in, all of the music things. I was in choir and band and marching band and the musicals, and that was just my, that was my thing. That was what I enjoyed doing. So when I went to college, I knew that I wanted to study music, but I didn't know in what capacity. I had no idea exactly what I wanted to do with it. So I thought maybe I'd teach. Who knew? So when I went to college, I had a teacher that told me, you're going to sing opera. And I was like, no, I'm not. I'm not going to do that. That's ridiculous. And because I was really into musical theater at the time. So I was singing musical theater, and, the professors kept pushing me to try opera. So I eventually tried it, and I was in a small one-act opera called Gallantry my first year. And the minute I was on stage and I was doing it in rehearsals, I was like, yeah, I'm sold. This is what I'm going to do for the rest of my life. I don't know what it was. It was just, for some reason, it had a little bit more depth to me than the musical theater that I had done. And not to say that musical theater is bad or anything, but for me personally, it was a little bit more fulfilling in that way.
Is that like depth emotionally or stylistically?
I think it was stylistically. I think it was the singing, the orchestra, it was just stylistically, I guess. And also my voice, my personal vocal technique worked better with that style of music. So yeah. Yeah.
That's interesting, because I feel like people, even if they like musical theater, a lot of those people will still say, oh, well, opera's not for me. And so I find it interesting to sort of pinpoint some of the differences, because I'll admit I didn't really understand them when I first came into my job, other than obviously the tone and the style of singing is completely different.
Yeah.
But yeah, so that's interesting.
Yeah, and then when I continued studying it, the languages and the background and the cultures and the history of opera was so intriguing to me, because musical theater is a very American thing, and that's great, but I loved the variety that there was in the opera repertoire. I was really intrigued by that, and I just loved it. So
yeah. So how does that history sort of reconcile with where new contemporary opera is? Like, how do you think that those two things, because they seem very different to me, and the culture is in a way sort of separated now, since we're not in the same spaces, we don't have the same lives, the way that we're experiencing it is very different. So I don't know, that's a really broad question.
That is, that's a hard question. How do they reconcile? So I think actually they're still, those two styles are not reconciling yet, I think, is the problem. I think that's the issue. I find that, personally, I don't think new American opera is being done enough. I think it needs to be done more. And I think it's just because it's different, and it's obviously much different than Mozart, right? It's not the same kind of music, and I think it freaks people out. But, I think we need to dive into it more as a society, because I think it's interesting, and it tells stories that are contemporary and, not stories that were told 200 years ago.
Yeah.
So
yeah, sometimes it's hard to update older stories to
Yes.
fit. Like Pagliacci, I mean, it is a clown show
Yeah.
when you get down to it, and that's not super common. Elixir of
Yeah.
Love is a little easier, but
It is, yeah.
yeah.
I think some of the best contemporary opera, and I think this is probably true for any era, but the best elements of that are giving the audience something to hold on to, just a little bit of something that they can connect to
Yes.
before diving into that stuff that's really challenging.
Right.
Like I thought that's proving up last year, some of the stuff that Missy Mazzoli did in that. There were these very, very sort of ethereal sort of soundscapes that she made with this like hanging wall of guitars that she had and all the percussion and stuff that he had. But then there were like fiddle tunes that would come out occasionally, something that people could say, hey, this is familiar, and then dive back into the depths. And I think that's what it really takes to get people to come along with you into that really challenging space, is just having something people can grab onto.
Yeah, and another perfect example of having something that people can grab onto is Glory Denied by Tom Capullo. It's about an American it's based on a true story about an American war veteran, and like people connect with that now in this current society. So that's interesting, and I think we need to explore it more and tell more current contemporary stories, especially in the climate that we're in, because that's really powerful. So I think that Mozart, Puccini, the classics are always going to be the classics, and everybody's going to love them, and that's wonderful. But I think we need more American contemporary opera being, performed at the opera houses. I think that would be really great in the future.
Yeah. So do you guys think that the bigger barrier, if you already have someone who's willing to try opera in the first place, the bigger barrier is thematic or storytelling versus music? So do you think that everybody in theory could enjoy the tone as far as how people sing opera, but it's really more an issue of the storytelling that's not catching up?
That's a hard question, because I think it's very subjective. I think it's different for everybody. As an audience member.
Sure. Yeah, I guess this is assuming someone's already willing to buy in at least a little.
Right.
That's the trickiest part for me, is I think just getting that buy-in of opera can be a thing that's for me. There's definitely along with this cultural tradition that we've been talking about, there's been, unfortunately, I think a lot of barriers that have been kind of built at that time of opera being a certain, for a certain, class or certain type of or certain part of the society. And getting over that hurdle is part of the big part. But I think one of the best ways to do that, beyond what Kate's doing and her colleagues bringing it out into places that are not the traditional opera house, part of it is just great storytelling. And I think that's, the music is always going to be challenging. I think that's what sort of separates it from some of the musical theater type things is just that this is really music that's trying to push the envelope. There's some great musical theater that does experimental things too, but that's with opera often that's kind of really the point. And so that part is always going to be, I think, a challenge for people, but the way to draw them into that challenge is, I think, through really good storytelling.
Yeah, and I find in our work, in the community engagement that we do also, is it's the storytelling and also the human connection. When you go and just speak to people and hang out with people, they realize, oh, this is just another person. Like, opera isn't this big, grand thing for rich, lavish people. It's for everybody. And so I think that human connection is really important to make so everybody realizes that it's for everyone, for all populations. It's here, and we want to make it accessible for everybody.
Yeah, when you can go talk to an opera singer about what they do and, realize that it's work like any other type of work. You have to go out and train yourself and, really really make it your profession. And so everyone go out and talk to an opera singer.
Yeah.
Go befriend an opera singer. They're really not scary people.
Yeah, I love the idea of demystifying that type of art form, because I feel like that is, I guess, part of the barrier. But yeah, having talked to all the opera singers that come through Opera Omaha's doors, it's been really fun. And also, back to sort of the musical difficulty of opera. I'm pretty familiar with music, and I listen to some of the opera things, some of the opera scores and things, and I'm like, I didn't think that was going to go that way. It really is not predictable, and I think that's kind of exciting, but also why maybe it's difficult for people to that it does lack a tangibility right there. And not sounding like anything that you've necessarily heard before. So I don't know. That's like just something that I've realized recently, but we'll see how that works. But the contemporary stuff was it was experimental. Like when you guys did that one set that I don't remember the name of. What was that one set that all the fellas did?
The concert with Ellen Reed.
Yeah, the concert with Ellen Reed. That, even though it was experimental, it definitely felt more modern. And so in that respect, I feel like that's a little easier. Even though I am familiar with more classical music. That was a little easier to get a hold of.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, what you guys do is really important, and I hope more people will realize that opera isn't quite as lofty as it seems.
Yeah, that's our goal.
Yeah.
One of our many goals. Yeah.
And pivoting back to you, I would love to hear about sort of the process of what you go through with artists when they come to you for financial help.
Yeah.
What does that look like?
Well, the trickiest thing for people, I mean, obviously what most people are focused on is going out and getting themselves hired and getting work, and that's kind of the most important, way that a lot of people can go out and spend their time. And the challenging thing, like I referred to before, is that most people don't learn in school all these other parts of what they need to do to make a career for themselves, taxes and savings and all that kind of stuff, and really being able to manage their financial lives so they're not constantly stressing out about money, because that doesn't really help with being able to do good artistic work either. If you're constantly worried about your money. So my process is really focused on stability, security. I think that's the main thing that that most of the people I work with just want, is to feel like they have a sense of security, so that they're not worrying about this stuff all the time. It's really just getting a system down where they can manage the kind of ups and downs in incomes. Like as a singer, you might have a great month in December when you're doing all your Christmas gigs, and you might have a summer festival that pays you pretty well and that kind of thing. But then January might be a slow month. You might not get much income that month. And so how do you make sure that there's money left over from the good months to cover you for the slower months, And so that's the kind of thing I work with. There's other stuff I work on that's challenging, like health insurance, trying to manage the system that's out there right now, and taxes is a big thing for my clients too. But it's really kind of all these challenges that people have, and I take that from my own experience as a performer myself. I don't come from a finance background. I had no knowledge, no inkling of any of that stuff when I graduated from college, and realized pretty quick that I needed to learn how to manage it, and that there's not really anyone out there who kind of does this to help people through it. There's just not a lot of reliable advice out there, and the financial industry is kind of focused on people who already have a lot of money. And so that's kind of, that was a hard thing to manage too. So when I moved to Omaha about a year and a half ago, I took that opportunity to just make this make this company be something that's in my own image, and this was something I'd wanted to do for a long time. So
feels like Omaha is the perfect place for it too, because there's such a high concentration of artists, and I think places for them to showcase their work too. I've been really impressed with that.
Yeah,
Definitely.
it's a great place, and honestly, most of my clients are not in Omaha. They're
okay.
I do a lot of virtual meetings with people, and so they're kind of on the coast, but I do have clients in Omaha, and yeah, it is great for that.
Yeah. Okay, I'll ask one final sort of goofy question, but and it doesn't really have to relate to your work at all, but what type of music do you guys listen to, or what kind of art do you consume, like whether that's a book or movies, or just like I'm trying to dig beyond like, oh, I'm an opera singer, but what do you do in your downtime? What media do you consume, basically?
Well,
you can lie to me if it's embarrassing.
No, I listen to a lot of like post-rock music. I listen to a lot of Explosions in the Sky, This Will Destroy You, stuff like that, Caspian. And then I've really been enjoying Rupi Kaur's poetry lately. I really enjoy her stuff. It's very inspiring. I'm trying to think of, and of course I watch a lot of Netflix. Who doesn't watch a lot of Netflix? There's some series on there that I like. I like the Peaky Blinders specifically. Been really into that.
That's a wide variety of
yeah,
things.
it's kind of
Can't typecast you there.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's
I definitely go in phases. I used to watch a lot more TV. I don't as much anymore, mostly just because there are so many things out there, and I don't know, I get overwhelmed, so I just don't I don't watch it. But I mean I read a lot, but again, that goes in phases too. But usually I'm a big history fan, so I read a lot of books on history. I really love I don't know about love, but I'm fascinated by the first Gilded Age, kind of around the turn of the century in America, and how a lot of the issues that were they were experiencing then around great wealth inequality and discrimination and things that were happening then are really kind of coming up again today. I found that era very interesting. What else? I listen to music that goes in phases. Sometimes I will just listen to choir music. I will just listen to Bach, or I will just listen to Alabama Shakes. I'm kind of like all over the place with my musical taste right now. Or sometimes I'll just listen to opera. I'll just listen to Puccini. What else? I read Twitter a lot. Yeah. Too much. That's a form of media, and
absolutely.
It kind of broke my brain for a little while. But
Yeah, I listen to a lot of Jack White too.
Nice.
Oh yeah,
a lot of Jack White.
Is he making new music at all, or?
I
He had a new album last year.
last year. I don't think he is currently, but
I kind of was left behind a few years ago.
I always listen to Jack White.
Yeah, I think that listen to rock music or pop music or contemporary music now is really interesting in the sort of streaming era. I'm not really sure how that's affected classical music. I know people don't really sell CDs anymore.
Yeah,
right.
That's a really good question.
Put out albums. I'm not sure if there's someone else you can talk to one of these days who knows a little bit more about the recording industry.
I'm sure there's like a whole SoundCloud place just for them that I wouldn't have even touched on.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's actually a really good question. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. I mean, I know a lot of classical like vocalists and still put out their albums on iTunes, but now it's like you have a subscription and then you can just download whatever, so it's not the same, so I don't know how that works.
I mean, it seems like everyone is really moving to the subscription model, so that's just that's going to be par for the course, I'm sure. Yeah, okay. I'm trying to think, is there anything that you guys wanted to ask each other?
I don't know. I think kind of bottom line, what I was thinking about how to connect what I do just on the title side and what you do, Kate, is I think we both make it easier for people who don't already have this knowledge and culture of opera baked in to be able to experience and enjoy the storytelling involved with it, with you bringing it out into the community and me putting words up where people don't necessarily know the words. So if you're looking for a common denominator, I think that's a good place for it.
Yeah, I think we both make it more accessible and approachable for everybody, anybody and everybody.
That's the hope.
Yep.
Yeah. Well, thank you guys for talking to me. This was really fun.
Cool. Thank you, Lily.
Yeah, thank you.
Thanks.